The scent of damp earth filled John Hawk's nostrils as he crouched low in the thick underbrush, his pulse steady but his muscles coiled, ready. The jungle-like expanse of Daggett 7 was his home now, a place of towering alien trees and dense, bioluminescent vines. The colony lay a few miles behind him, its soft glow barely visible through the thick foliage. He had come out here for solitude, a moment to breathe. Then the first shot came. The ground exploded beside him, sending soil and shattered bark into the air. He rolled instinctively, his military reflexes snapping into place. The blast hadn't come from a simple energy rifle. It was something heavier. Something designed to kill, not just wound. Hawk pressed himself against the thick trunk of a tree, his keen eyes scanning the darkness beyond. A distorted voice crackled through the jungle, guttural and laced with amusement. "Run, human!" Hawk's jaw clenched. He didn't run. He exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance. He was unarmed except for a combat knife strapped to his thigh, but that wasn't what concerned him. No, the problem was that these weren't raiders or bandits. This was a hunt. He had seen the signs earlier, the clawed footprints too large to belong to any known colony predator, the faint shimmer of camouflaged drones in the sky. The bastards had been watching him, studying him. He remained motionless, ears tuned to the unnatural silence around him. No insects. No night birds. Just the faint hum of energy weapons being readied. Then, another voice, deeper, commanding. "He won't run. This one has teeth." Hawk allowed himself the ghost of a smirk. Damn right, he had teeth. A flicker of movement, something large shifting in the darkness. Hawk's mind worked fast. He couldn't fight them head-on, not yet. He needed an advantage. Terrain, surprise, misdirection. He glanced upward at the thick canopy. The trees here were sturdy, their twisting branches high enough to give him a better view. If he could get above them, he could move unseen. The next shot sizzled past his shoulder, scorching a deep burn into the tree behind him. That was enough. He bolted, not forward, not backward, but sideways, disappearing into the foliage. He moved like a ghost, silent and precise, his steps practiced from years of jungle warfare. A deep chuckle followed him. "He thinks he can hide." Hawk reached the base of a thick tree and leaped, catching the lowest branch with calloused hands. With a practiced motion, he hoisted himself up, scaling the trunk swiftly and disappearing into the dense cover above. He positioned himself on a wide, sturdy branch and stilled his breathing. Below, he caught glimpses of movement, hulking figures with predatory grace, their weapons glowing in the dark like the eyes of a beast. 3 of them. 7 feet tall, clad in dark, segmented armor. Their helmets curved back into ridged crests, resembling some unholy fusion of reptile and machine. They moved with confidence. They had no idea they were the hunted now. Hawk waited. Seconds stretched. One of the hunters walked directly beneath his perch, scanning the ground with an advanced optical visor. The moment its back turned, Hawk dropped. His boots struck the alien's broad shoulders, driving the massive creature to the ground. Before it could react, his knife flashed, slicing through the exposed gap between the helmet and chest plate. Thick, dark blood sprayed as the alien thrashed, choking on its own breath. The jungle exploded with movement. The remaining 2 spun, raising their weapons, but Hawk was already moving. He rolled, vanishing into the undergrowth before the first shot landed. Energy blasts carved glowing scars into the trees, but he was gone. A shadow among shadows. A snarl of frustration. "He killed Gore-Tech! The human fights back!" Hawk didn't stop. He moved deeper into the wilderness, his mind racing. This wasn't just survival anymore. They had brought the fight to him, made him prey. Now, he was going to make them regret it. The night air was thick with the scent of scorched bark and alien blood. John Hawk crouched behind the remains of a fallen tree, ears tuned to the jungle around him. He could hear the creatures searching for him, their deep, guttural clicks echoing through the darkness. They weren't just hunters, they were strategists. He had killed one of their own, and now they would be more careful. He needed to be smarter. A low hum pulsed through the air. Hawk's gaze flicked upward. One of their drones hovered above the treetops, scanning for heat signatures. He knew better than to stay still for too long. Staying in one place meant death. The crunch of footsteps reached his ears. Close. They were moving slow now, deliberate. He spotted two of them, weaving through the foliage with practiced ease. They had spread out, trying to funnel him into a kill zone. Hawk pressed his palm against the damp ground, feeling the earth, mapping out the terrain in his mind. A shallow ravine lay just ahead, lined with thick roots and vines. If he could lure them in, he might even the playing field. He moved, swift and silent, slipping into the shadows. He needed to control the battlefield. The first alien, bigger than the last, its armor glistening under the moonlight, stepped into the clearing. Its weapon, a jagged energy rifle, pulsed with a dim red glow. The second hunter flanked the opposite side, covering all escape routes. "You cannot hide forever, human," one of them rumbled. "You fight well, but this is our game." Hawk's lip curled. His foot pressed against a loose rock. He nudged it forward, letting it tumble into the ravine. The sound echoed through the trees. Immediately, both aliens turned, their visors locking onto the disturbance. He struck. Hawk launched himself from the brush, his knife flashing in the dark. He struck the first alien's wrist, the blade slicing through the sensitive joint beneath its gauntlet. The creature roared in pain as its weapon clattered to the ground. Before it could react, he drove his knee into its gut and wrenched its own rifle from its grasp. The second alien fired. Hawk barely had time to twist, feeling the heat of the blast graze his shoulder. The pain was sharp, but he ignored it. Adrenaline fueled his movements. He dove into the ravine, rolling as he landed. The first alien, still clutching its wounded arm, staggered forward in pursuit. The second followed, their bulky frames forcing them into single file. Exactly as Hawk had planned. He gripped the stolen rifle, leveling it at the nearest target. The weapon was unfamiliar in his hands, but he understood one thing: pulled the trigger. The shot hit center mass. The energy blast struck the first alien's chest, burning through armor and flesh. It let out a strangled gasp before crumpling, its massive form collapsing into the dirt. The second roared in fury, charging forward. Hawk barely had time to react. He threw himself backward as the creature swung a blade, the jagged edge slicing through his shirt but missing his skin by inches. The rifle was useless now, too slow to fire again. He let it drop. The alien lunged again, but this time, Hawk was ready. He sidestepped, grabbing a thick vine hanging from a tree. With one swift motion, he looped it around the alien's neck and yanked with all his strength. The creature thrashed, clawing at the vine, its strength immense. But Hawk had the advantage: leverage. He twisted, using its momentum against it, slamming its head against the ravine wall. Once. Twice. A third time. The alien's movements slowed, then stopped. Its body sagged. Hawk let go. Breathing heavily, he stepped back, scanning his surroundings. Two more down. But he knew better than to celebrate. A metallic voice crackled through the trees, low and amused. "You impress me, human!" Hawk turned, every muscle tensed. At the top of the ravine, standing under the pale glow of the twin moons, was the leader. Zrakesh. Unlike the others, he wasn't in a hurry. He didn't need to be. He stood tall, his armor gleaming with intricate markings, a long blade resting at his hip. His eyes, dark and calculating, met Hawk's. "You are not prey," Zrakesh continued. "You are something else." Hawk wiped a streak of blood from his face, meeting the alien's gaze without fear. "You should have figured that out before you started this game." The warlord's lips curled into a grin. "Oh, but the game is far from over." Hawk tightened his grip on his knife. Either of them moved. The real hunt had just begun. The jungle was silent. Too silent. John Hawk knew what that meant. Zrakesh had ordered a tactical shift. No more careless hunting. No more scattered movements. The aliens were recalibrating, adapting. They weren't just looking for him now, they were waiting. Hawk crouched low in the thick brush, eyes scanning the terrain. His shoulder throbbed where the energy blast had grazed him earlier, but he pushed the pain aside. He had two advantages now: a stolen weapon and the knowledge that they finally understood his threat. The air felt heavy, electric with anticipation. A distant click echoed through the jungle. Then another. A pattern. They were communicating. Hawk exhaled slowly. He had seen this before. Tactical sweep formation. They were driving him toward a choke point, pushing him into a controlled space where they could corner him. He smirked. Let them think they had him. With deliberate movements, he slung the alien rifle across his back and started moving. Not fast, not reckless. Silent. A shadow slipping between the towering trees. A faint shimmer in the air caught his eye. He froze. Camouflage tech. One of them was close, nearly invisible, but not perfect. A slight distortion betrayed the outline against the dense foliage. Hawk's fingers wrapped around the hilt of his combat knife. One breath. Two. He lunged. The knife plunged into unseen flesh. A guttural snarl broke the silence as the camouflage flickered and failed, revealing the hulking form of the alien soldier. Its mandibles snapped in fury, but Hawk didn't stop. He twisted the blade, forcing the creature to its knees. A pulse grenade clattered to the ground beside them. Hawk shoved the dying alien forward and threw himself backward as the explosion detonated. The shockwave sent leaves and dirt flying. His ears rang, but he didn't wait to recover. He rolled onto his feet and sprinted. Another shot blasted past him, burning through the trunk of a tree inches from his head. They were closing in. He needed to change the game again. Hawk slid into a narrow ravine, pressing his back against the jagged rock. He gritted his teeth. He couldn't outrun them forever. He had to set the terms of the fight. The colony wasn't far. If he could reach the supply depot, he might find something useful. A real weapon. Explosives. Anything. The problem? He had to cross open ground. He scanned the area. No sign of movement. But that meant nothing. He took a breath. Then he ran. The night split open with gunfire. Energy rounds tore into the ground behind him, burning deep craters into the soil. Hawk didn't stop. His legs pumped, muscles screaming, but he forced himself forward. 50 yards. 40. A sharp whistle cut through the air. Too late. A weighted net fired from the tree lean, uncoiling midair. Hawk barely had time to react before it hit him full force, knocking him off balance. He crashed into the dirt, arms tangled, the webbing constricting around him. Footsteps approached. He twisted, struggling, but the fibers tightened like steel cables. Zrakesh's voice rumbled through the dark. I warned you, human! Hawk looked up. The alien leader stood over him, flanked by two warriors. Their weapons were lowered, but not out of respect. They thought this was over. Hawk's lips curled into a grin. Bad move. Before they could react, he yanked the stolen energy rifle from its sling, still tangled in the net, but his finger found the trigger. One shot. The closest warrior took the blast to the chest, its armor cracking under the force. It staggered, but Hawk didn't wait to see if it went down. He twisted, aiming again. Zrakesh moved faster than expected. The alien leader lashed out, kicking the rifle from Hawk's hands with brutal precision. The impact rattled through his ribs. The weapon clattered away. Silence. Zrakesh stepped forward. You fight harder than any prey I've hunted. Hawk's muscles tensed. The net constricted further, digging into his skin. He ignored the pain. Zrakesh knelt beside him, mandibles clicking in curiosity. I could end you now, he mused. Hawk held his gaze. Then why don't you? A slow grin spread across the alien's face. Because I want to see how far you can go. He stood. With a flick of his wrist, he gestured to his warriors. Take him. Hawk felt rough hands grip his arms. The net loosened just enough for movement, but not escape. They hauled him to his feet, weapons pressed against his back. He let out a slow breath. This wasn't over. Not even close. John Hawk's wrists burned as the alien restraints bit into his skin. The shackles, made from some kind of electrified alloy, sent jolts through his body whenever he moved too suddenly. His captors had dragged him through the dense jungle, pushing him toward their encampment, a makeshift war camp hidden within the terrain. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and metallic ozone. Strange, angular structures jutted out from the earth, their surfaces pulsing with dim, green energy. At the center stood Rakesh, waiting. Hawk was shoved to his knees before him. The alien leader studied him, his mandibles shifting in thought. Most humans would beg by now, he mused. Hawk exhaled, rolling his shoulders despite the restraints. Most humans aren't me. Rakesh let out a low chuckle. That is why you are still alive. Hawk's gaze flicked around the camp. Several warriors stood guard, weapons at the ready, but they weren't watching him with caution anymore. They thought the fight was over. They were wrong. Rakesh stepped closer, tilting his head. Your species is unpredictable. You should be broken, yet you wait, plotting. Hawk smirked. You catch on fast. The alien leader's mandibles twitched in amusement. Then tell me, what is your plan? Hawk's fingers curled. Wouldn't you like to know? Rakesh's hand lashed out, gripping Hawk's throat. His claws pressed just enough to warn, but not to crush. The warriors around them tensed, waiting for their leader's next move. Hawk didn't flinch. He met the alien's gaze, unwavering. You enjoy the hunt, he rasped. But you don't understand the difference between predator and prey. Rakesh's grip tightened for a second, then he released him, intrigued rather than angered. Explain. Hawk flexed his fingers. The restraints were tight, but not unbreakable. He just needed the right moment. You think you've won. That I'm at your mercy. His voice was calm, measured. That's why you're standing too close. Rakesh frowned. Hawk moved. With a sharp twist, he wrenched his arms apart. The restraints sparked, overloaded by the sudden pressure. Pain shot through his wrists, but he ignored it. His left hand shot up, grabbing the alien leader's blade from its holster. Before Rakesh could react, Hawk buried the weapon deep into his side. The alien staggered, mandibles parting in shock. The camp erupted. Hawk twisted the blade free and ducked, narrowly avoiding a plasma shot from one of the warriors. He rolled forward, snatching a fallen rifle from the ground. His fingers found the trigger before his mind processed the action. He fired. The first shot struck a warrior in the chest, sending it crashing backward. Another charged, swinging a blade, but Hawk sidestepped, driving the butt of the rifle into its throat. The alien collapsed, choking. Rakesh recovered fast. Despite the deep wound in his side, he roared and lunged. Hawk barely dodged in time. The alien leader's claws raked across his shoulder, tearing fabric and skin. He grit his teeth, pain flaring through his arm. Rakesh's eyes burned with fury. You fight like a beast, he snarled. Hawk wiped blood from his mouth. And you underestimated me. They circled each other. The remaining warriors hesitated, waiting for their leader's command. Hawk didn't give them the chance. He fired twice, forcing the aliens to scatter. Rakesh lunged again, but Hawk anticipated it. He ducked low, swinging the stolen blade upward. The strike connected. The blade sliced through Rakesh's armor, cutting deep into his shoulder. The alien staggered back, breathing heavy. Blood dripped onto the dirt. Hawk straightened, rifle aimed at his opponent's head. Call them off. His voice was steady. Rakesh's chest heaved. For a moment, the warlord said nothing. Then, with slow precision, he raised a clawed hand. The remaining warriors froze. Hawk kept his aim steady. You're done hunting humans. Rakesh's mandibles twitched. He exhaled, then, unexpectedly, laughed. You are more than prey, he admitted. You are a hunter. Hawk didn't lower his weapon. And you lost. Rakesh inclined his head, acknowledging the truth. Perhaps. A tense silence stretched between them. Then, the warlord gestured to his warriors. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Hawk exhaled. His body ached, blood still dripping from his wounds, but he had won. Zrakash studied him one last time. Then, in a voice filled with something resembling respect, he said, "We will not hunt your kind again." Hawk nodded. "Smart choice." Without another word, he turned and walked away. The hunt was over.